Tundu Lissu, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for having me.
Well, we are pleased to have you here, not least because 16 months ago it looked as though you would probably die. Somehow, miraculously, you survived an assassination attempt which saw 20 bullets pumped into your body. How are you today?
I'm very well compared to what I was 14 months ago. As you said, I was shot multiple times. Actually, I was shot 16 times to be exact.
I guess some of the bullets hit the car rather than you because they sprayed
those
the area.
Those that hit me were 16 bullets. Those that sprayed the car, I'm told, were 38.
Wow.
So 16 hits and 22 surgeries later, and here I am.
You seem to believe that there was a definite political intent to that attack upon you.
Yes, absolutely.
So what's your proof?
Well, the proof is in the circumstances leading up to the attack. You see, for about 6 weeks before I was shot, there were people following me, following my car everywhere I went. There were, you know, everywhere I went, I would be the car tailing me. And then I met...
They could, of course, have been anybody. I mean, it should be said for those who don't know you, you were a very public figure in Tanzania, not just because you're a senior opposition party member, you were the whip of the opposition in the Tanzanian parliament, but also you were the head of the sort of legal association.
The National Bar Association.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there were probably, I dare say, a lot of people, but some of them bad people, who might have had an animus against you. You can't be sure who might have tried to kill you.
Those with whom we have proof that they had bad animus against me are the government. For a year preceding the attack on me on September 7 of 2017, I was arrested 8 times. I was charged in court with this or that offense of sedition. These are free speech offenses 6 times. There were open calls by people who we know to be members of the ruling party who called openly for my assassination after I had denounced the president, after I had revealed that one of his petty projects, this acquisition of new aircraft for Air Tanzania, had actually been seized in Canada because of his breach of contract while he was serving as Minister of Public Works.
You made a series of serious allegations of corruption. Of course, the President has denied and dismissed all of them. Equally, it should be said, in the intervening months, the 14 or 15 months since the assassination attempt, the government and the authorities in Tanzania have come up with no evidence pointing to any association with the government in terms of this attack. So you seem to me to be making some allegations and some connections and claims which are highly inflammatory in today's Tanzania, but you don't have the evidence.
Listen, Steve. I am the chief whip of the official opposition. I'm a parliamentary leader. I live in a government housing compound that is heavily guarded 24 hours, 7 days a week. Every apartment block inside that compound is guarded 24 hours, 7 days a week. And on the day of the attack, in broad daylight, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, during lunch break, during the parliamentary sessions, gunmen followed me from Parliament into this heavily guarded government housing compound where ministers, members of Parliament, the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, and so on and so forth live. And there was absolutely no protection. There were no guards at the gate. There was no security whatsoever.
I understand all that, but I'm also mindful of legal niceties here. And the President did say, after the attack, that he utterly condemned it, and he called immediately on law enforcement to catch and punish the culprits. Did the President talk to you after the attack?
He has never, ever spoken in public about this attempted assassination. Never. There was a tweet there was a tweet, a very small, very quick tweet, and it disappeared. But the president has never, ever publicly spoken about the assassination attempt. The president, and this comes from the Speaker of Parliament, the president has blocked efforts to have me treated at the cost of Parliament, which is my statutory right.
And again, just to keep people informed of what has happened since, in the year and more since the attack, you have had to have medical treatment, first in Kenya, but extensive treatment, rehabilitation in Belgium.
In Belgium.
So you've been based in Belgium for a long time, and you've had an awful lot of time to reflect. When you think about some of the things you said in the lead-up, the summer of 2017, before the assassination attempt, you called the president a petty dictator. At one point, you called on the international community to treat Tanzania, and I'm quoting you directly, as the skunk of the world.
Yes.
Yeah, now that you've had time to reflect, do you think you went too far? You went over the top.
Governments that kill their citizens, governments that use their security forces to target their political opponents, governments that prohibit political rights which are protected by the Constitution, governments that cause civilians to be abducted and disappear, like it was with those obnoxious Latin American dictatorships of the 60s and 70s, the governments that have occasioned loss of lives, that destroy innocent lives. In the world, those governments deserve to be described as the skunks of the world.
How disappointed are you that the Tanzanian people, they listen to you, they listen to the president, they weigh up the different messages, and right now the president enjoys an approval rating that is well over 50%, some measures at 70%, and there is every sign that both he and the ruling party are going to win, and win big, in the next round of elections?
Mr. Sarkar, I will say this. During the first year of President Magufuli's tenure, we were told his approval rating was in the high 80s. A year later, early last year, one of those pollsters came up with polling that showed that the president's approval rating had dropped to 61%. And you know what happened? The managing director of that polling firm had his citizenship questioned, his passport seized, and for all intents and purposes, they will never do it again. Because now, immediately after, a new statistics law was passed which says if you bring out statistics that put the government in a bad light, you are a criminal.
Before we get there, just on this matter of whether the president is seen by his people to be doing a good job, let's just consider a few of the achievements of this administration, the Magufuli administration. He promised to cut out much of the corruption in the country. We saw in the first few weeks and months of his administration thousands of ghost workers being removed from the payroll. We saw some very senior figures being removed from the Port Authority, the Revenue Service, because they had been systematically corrupt. If you ask Tanzanians today, according to all of the evidence, they feel their country is cleaner, less corrupt than it was when he took office. And in Africa, that is actually quite an achievement.
We also saw the president building a brand new airport in his home village, like Mobutu Sese Seko with his village in the middle of the forest somewhere in the Congo. We've seen the president doing, and they say it openly, that the president is purchasing aircraft for Air Tanzania Corporation. Now, that is none of the president's job.
You point to some very specific instances. I point to systems. For example, there is no doubt that the Tax and Revenue Service is bringing in more today than it was before Magufuli came to power. He has, it seems, delivered on his promise to make Tanzanians pay their taxes to be a more efficient, a more responsible society and economy. And that is a really big deal.
In fact, on the contrary, there was a spike, there was an increase in tax revenue during the first year, in 2016, 2017, thereabout. But since then, revenues tax revenues for the government have gone down. And why? Because the president has attacked the business community. He's attacked private investors. Investment is drying up. And therefore,
well, hang on. You say he's attacked private investors.
Yes.
What he's done, again, is deliver on a specific promise made to get a little bit tougher with the foreign corporates, including the huge mining companies, who have been making vast profits out of Tanzania's natural resources for years. He said he would get tougher with them. He has delivered on that. And the Tanzanian people, again, I come back to all of the polling evidence, it seems like what he has done.
Well, whose polling are we talking about here? When the president and his party and his government pass laws that prohibit independent verification of the statistics they're giving publicly, who is there to say that these figures are correct?
I don't want to just stick to polls. Let's take the analysis of a respected independent observer of Tanzania, Dan Padgett. He writes on Tanzanian affairs, both at Oxford University and SOAS. He says this: Magufuli has defied the assumption that African states cannot take on big multinational corporations and win. He sought out a confrontation with the mining companies, which eventually led to Barrick Gold and others agreeing a deal that involves substantial concessions to Tanzania. Are you seriously, as an opposition, saying you don't like that?
Barrick has not agreed any deal. We were told by the president himself that Barrick had agreed to pay $300 million as, I don't know what they called, like a golden handshake, I don't know. But the president himself made a statement that they have agreed to make a payment, an immediate payment of $300 million. They have not paid a penny. Not a penny. They were slapped with a tax bill of $194 billion. They have not paid a penny. Not a penny.
But it seems you don't even want the government to take on the big foreign corporates.
Well,
You've been complaining, saying, oh, we must be nicer to them.
And I have not said that at all. I spent 19 years, from 1999, when everyone, Magufuli included, were singing the praises of these investors in the mining sector, were ripping us off. 19 years was the sole voice to the contrary.
If I may say, if it is so clear that Magufuli and his administration are failing the Tanzanian people, why is it that in the last year a substantial number, at least 6, possibly, depending on how you read it, 10 members of opposition in Parliament, and of course there are various parties in the opposition, but at least 10 members, it seems, have defected to the government side, including some of the most senior figures who were leading the opposition to Magufuli? They're now on his side.
There has been a major trade. There has been a major commercial enterprise in politics in Tanzania over the past 1 year.
What do you mean?
I mean precisely that people have been given money to change sides. People have been promised that if you change sides, we will ensure that you return as a candidate, and we will use whatever force we have in our capacity to make sure that you win. And that's exactly what happened.
You're a very senior lawyer, so you know better than I that it's very dangerous to bandy about these allegations when you don't have specific evidence, when, of course, the people who you're making the allegations against, i.e. some senior figures in the opposition, are not here to defend themselves, and they absolutely categorically deny all the charges you've just laid at their door. Let's take one example. Lawrence Masha, he was Home Affairs Minister in the government of Kikwete for a while. Then he became an opponent of Magufuli, was very hard on Magufuli, but in recent times has decided what he sees from Magufuli is actually quite positive. He says, while you may not always agree with the president and the way he does things, his heart is in the right place. He is having an impact on the lives of everyday Tanzanians.
Mr. Saka, in the 3 years since President Magufuli came to office, 380 civilians, villagers in Kibiti, Kilwa, Rufiji, and Mkuranga district, just south of Dar es Salaam, have disappeared. Bodies have been washed, found, floating in River Rufiji, in the Indian Ocean beaches. This is unprecedented in the history of Tanzania. We've never seen anything like this. We've seen in those 3 years political opponents of the government and his party being murdered with complete impunity. No investigation, no arrests, not even suspicion. murdered in broad daylight. This is unprecedented. Now, is this the price that we must pay in order to have less corruption?
Is this the Tanzania you want, where the language being used and the allegations being made are getting ever more inflammatory? The government clearly is worried by this. They've passed a whole raft of measures and proposed some more, which many would say repress freedom of speech. They say it's because they are so very worried that freedom of speech in Tanzania is being abused by people spreading false allegations, making up stories. That's why they've put new controls on social media, on bloggers. They've also, from time to time, closed down newspapers, radio stations. I just wonder whether, again, on reflection, you feel that the way you're making your political arguments is fanning the flames or actually cooling tensions?
Stephen, what I have said about the killings of civilians in the Rufiji area, what I have said about disappearances of political opponents, what I have said about the crackdown on the press, what I have said about individual bloggers or people sending these messages on WhatsApp groups and so on and so forth, has been said with more or less the same vehemence by the churches, by the press. They've been spoken in Parliament. They've been said by the international community. They have been repeated basically by the European Union in their recent resolution. So what I'm saying is nothing, absolutely nothing new for those who know what has been happening in Tanzania.
It does.
For the past
it faces
2 years.
you with a choice, though, because the government, even with its latest legislation, where it wants to repeal the Political Parties Act to make it much more difficult for opposition political parties to conduct what is being called activism on the streets, you then face a choice. Are you going to confront this government and its repressive legislation openly, and that could, of course, lead to violence, or are you going to find ways which are peaceable rather than potentially confrontational?
We have always fought political battles peacefully. We have never, ever advocated the use of violence as a political weapon.
Let's talk specifically about the reasons why the international community in the last few months has expressed grave concerns about what is happening in Tanzania and what the Magufuli administration is doing. They are particularly focused on some of the highly controversial conservative social messages and actions being made by the government. In particular, the World Bank cancelled a $300 million loan to Tanzania after the government reiterated its policy of banning pregnant girls from going to school. The EU withdrew its ambassador, and it voiced particular concern about the government's determination, it seems, to root out homosexuality and impose prison sentences of up to 30 years.
That has been the law for quite some time.
I know, but the government now is saying that it wants new measures to identify and punish homosexuals. So my question to you is, as a key figure in the opposition, are you prepared to speak out loudly against these repressive social measures of the current government?
We are on record that the issue of pregnant schoolgirls continuing with their education is a government policy. It is Magufuli's own government policy. It is in their own party manifesto. It is in their party documents. It is part of our law. So for the president to stand up and say, we will no longer educate schoolgirls because they are pregnant, is going not only against the law, it is also going against the stated party policy of his own party.
So you're clear on that. You absolutely reject his stand on that. What about his defense of the punitive laws on homosexuality? Would you, as a leading opposition figure here on Hard Talk, speak out against those punitive laws?
President Magufuli has said this, and
I'm not asking what he. We know he's deeply socially conservative on these issues.
We have to get the record straight, Steve. The president, the foreign minister, Dr. Mahiga, has said that whatever actions were taken by the Regional Commissioner for Dar es Salaam, those are not government policy. That is not government policy.
What I want to know, and I dare say many people around the world would like to know, is a senior African opposition politician prepared in public to say these laws that we have currently in our country on homosexuality, punishment of up to 30 years in prison, are utterly unacceptable, and if I achieve power, we will get rid of those laws?
Every individual is entitled to their privacy. We should never allow the government to start peeping into people's bedrooms.
So you would eliminate all of these laws which criminalize homosexuality?
Let me put my...
Please, yes, because we're out of time almost. Would you eliminate the laws that criminalize and punish homosexuality?
If they violate, and I think they violate the privacy, the right to privacy that is protected by the Constitution, then those laws are definitely unconstitutional. By the Constitution of Tanzania, I'm not talking about any other constitution. Our Constitution says these are private matters and they should remain private matters.
In the course of this interview, you've outlined so many different areas where you say the President is taking Tanzania in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Now, you've accused him of an awful lot of bad stuff during our conversation.
Yes.
Are you, having had your, all of your operations, your surgery and your rehabilitation, are you now ready to go back to Tanzania to fight this President politically, put your name on the ballot for the next presidential election?
My treatment is still ongoing. But I have stated clearly that when the doctors declare me fit to go, I will go to Tanzania. That is one. I'm not in exile. I'm in Belgium because I was shot 16 times and doctors have had to operate on me.
So are you prepared to go back to Tanzania without specific security and safety guarantees?
I will go back to Tanzania when I'm fully fit. And the President and his government will have to tell the world whether returning home to Tanzania I will be protected by the government, as I should. The government has a responsibility to make sure that I am safe. I'm still a member of Parliament. I'll go back to continue the work that I was chosen to do. And you spoke about the ballot. I have stated, if the people of Tanzania, if the members of my party believe that I'm the correct person to face President Magufuli in 2020, I'm more than ready to do so.
Tundu Lissu, we'll keep watching that story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, Steve.